The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I am your host, Peter Martin, Vice President of Business Development for HfN&x, with offices in Boston, Massachusetts, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Dallas, Texas, and Salt Lake City, Utah. HfN&x has a national footprint and presence in the world of healthcare facilities management. Go to HfN&x.com for more detail.
You can teach anybody anything in a book, but I really think that practical experience is the best teacher. And we've all forgot about that.
I am joined by Brian Cannella. Brian is a senior facility condition assessment manager for Aramark. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
So Brian and I have talked for many years, going back to when I was recruiting at Gosselin Martin. So probably 11 years now, Brian, 10, 11 years now. I said to him when we started, I was like, I have never seen you before. So hopefully I didn't insult him. I said, Brian, I always envisioned you shorter. So you and I are the same size, but this is the first time we've ever seen each other. So thanks for joining, Brian.
Well, thank you. I've always saw your picture on your profile. And,
yes.
I was a little taken back when I see you in a plaid shirt today. I expected to see a three-piece suit with the mafia-style white shirt, with cufflinks on. So I'll get over it. I'll be fine.
Well, as Brian and I were talking, it's chilly. It's -2 here this morning, or it was -2 at my house. So I wore the flannel coming in. I knew you might be a little bit offended by that, but it's the flannel fits the weather.
Understandable. And I think I've known you long enough. You're fine. I mean, I'm the sort of a guy that tells it like it is. And a lot of people become very offended by that because I don't think a lot of people can handle the truth. And that seems to be a big problem in today's world.
Brian is a senior facility condition assessment manager for Aramark. And he's been doing it for about 2.5 years now, Brian, traveling the country, going to different clients.
Since 2020, I've been doing that. And
5 years. Hard to believe.
Yeah, I know. I'm older than dirt. They store apples up in Washington. I think they use methane to keep them fresh, or carbon dioxide, or one of those. But maybe I'm preserved in that also. I'm not quite sure.
Well, Brian has a long career in healthcare facilities management, and part of the reason, and we talked about this, Brian, that I wanted to have you on is because you do tell it like it is. And as I said, Brian and I started talking when I was doing recruiting, and you get to know people, and I would always be very honest with you, depending upon who the client was. In healthcare, I know that there's some organizations where you need to watch what you say, and there are other organizations where you can be upfront and honest. And so Brian and I, with every recruitment, would always kind of have that discussion. I'd be like, you know what, Brian, I don't think they would be able to, take the straight talking, kind of like Harry Truman, right? The Straight Talk Express, or whatever the heck it was called. You've got great experience. I mean, I used to tell him I would put him up for any role, from a technical perspective, from a mechanical perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from knowing the business of healthcare facilities management and keeping hospitals safe and patients safe and creating that healing environment. I'd put you up against anybody. But as we know, there's that other side too. And so talk a little bit about that, Brian, if you don't mind. You give people a little bit of background. How have you seen the changes in the facilities management environment from when you started? And maybe you can give folks a little bit of a background on you from when you started and to where we are today.
Well, I started, let's just say many, many years ago, 30 plus years. And,
Yep.
When you started, it was not uncommon to find nurses or doctors coming into the OR, putting their cigar out or their cigarettes out in the ashtray, going outside, coming back in with their dirty booties on, and you wondered, well, it's a sterile environment. What's going on? It has totally changed. And unfortunately, we in the healthcare facility industry or in any life safety industry, whether it be hospitals, universities, colleges, healthcare, have not educated people on what is important. And people have lost that touch with passion. You know, you got to have passion for the job and heart. And a lot of people don't have it. They can say, oh, I know this and I know that. And they really don't know anything. And unfortunately, there's nobody out there in no schools or anything that teach this. And we are losing sight of that. You know, you get like Joint Commission used to have doctors that would come in and inspect life safety. And I remember I was in a place in Ohio, and I was cited for having plastic shower curtains. And, you know, I'm the kind of person that will not take yes or no for an answer. And I says, what do you mean you're going to cite me for plastic shower curtains? He goes, well, yeah, you've got all these shower curtains are plastic. I says, well, they're allowed. He goes, no, they're not. I says, well, it's okay. So on our exit interview, being the kind of guy I am, and not necessarily something that's a smart, you know, as they would say, pardon the French, a smart ass, I pulled out the book and I looked decorations. Shower curtains are allowed. And he says, well, gee, I didn't even know that. I learned something. So, you know, I think we don't educate our upcoming people that take over these positions that know what's going on. And we just teach them the basics. Unfortunately, that's not going to work in today's society. There's so many things that are wrong. I just did a survey in the state of Texas, and I was just astounded because it says in the code that anything that holds more than 50 people in a building, you need to have fire alarm system, you need to have sprinkler. So the one person came to me and says, well, I said to him, I says, what happens if all the power goes out? And, you know, right now they're losing power everywhere because of this ice storm that they're having. Yeah. And snowstorm. And they says, well, we got to use our phones to find a way down the steps. There wasn't one emergency light in the entire building. But we had fire alarm, we had sprinkler. So what good is that if you can't find your way out of the building? You know, no exit signs, no emergency egress lights anywhere in the building, especially in the equipment room. So there you have a mechanic. Let's say it's working on a piece of electrical equipment. Lights go out. No task lights. Okay, what's he do? Does he remove his finger? Does he remove the screwdriver? Does he remove whatever he's in there? And the problem is, what if he touches something energized? We don't even follow those same standards and codes. We don't teach our people that. And these are facility managers that are coming up through the ranks that have absolutely no idea. They don't look for the simple things. You know, it's always been about keep it simple or it's something stupid. And we don't teach that. You can teach anybody anything in a book, but I really think that practical experience is the best teacher. And we've all forgot about that. And when I was growing up, there was an old wood hick that lived below me, and God love him. A wood hick. Wood hick, meaning he was from the 1800s. He had a sawmill, and he would cut wood. He hauled logs out with horses. And his name, can I say his name? Sure. His name was Bert Shaw. God love him. And I would go down and split wood for him before I'd go to school. And, you know, he taught me a lot. And the one thing that I learned from him is we all forgot about the simple things in life. You know, when was the last time you went to your neighbors for a cup of coffee? You know, maybe we need to go back to heat with wood and light with kerosene, because you know so much more about yourself and the people you're around. Because now, what do you interact with? TV, your phone, the internet, You go to an airport and what do you see? There's 95% of the people are on their phone. Okay. Nobody interacts with anybody anymore. But the most important thing that I learned was how simple life was back then. We learned so much more by talking to people and interacting. And we don't even do that anymore. We don't rely on our colleagues, especially the older ones, to learn the processes and what's important in healthcare and or anywhere.
Wow. So that's why I want to have you on, Brian. Let me ask.
Was that a mouthful?
I always know what I'm getting. Let me ask you though, where does that passion, you said passion and one other thing, where does the passion come from?
I think it was from upbringing. My father said to me when he was passing away, he says, just remember one thing. He says, say what you mean and mean what you say and stick to the issues. People don't like to hear the issues. They want it to be somewhat sugar-coated. And that bothers me because I've never been like that. I tell it like it is. Right, wrong, indifferent. I might offend you, but I'm going to give you the truth. I'm going to tell you if it's broke. I'm going to tell you if it can't be fixed. I'm going to tell you if you're going to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it fixed. But my first priority in my life, the way I was brought up, it can be fixed. I mean, I restored a 1939 Galleon grader that people said, you can't fix it. I found the parts, restored it, use it to this day. It's about the passion. It's about having heart, the perseverance to find things, to be able to fix things and look beyond. The people say, oh, well, this is the way it is. No, that's not the way it is. You always ask why. How can you fix that? What do you mean you can't find anything? Don't tell me that. This is America. We have stuff out there in items for stuff that's back from 1800s. You should be able to find it. If you can't find it, you can make it. Never take the answer of no.
Have you always been that way?
I don't know. I know that I worked in a small hospital that we were basically broke. We went bankrupt, and unfortunately, during the end, we would bring in our own paper and our own toilet paper just to survive. But it was always from the CEO. Can you fix it? Can you do this? Is there another way around it? I think that developed into taking no for an answer, because you would call the customer or the vendors and they'd say, oh, you can't get those parts. I said, what do you mean you can't get those parts? It's a standard bearing. It's got one shield in it. Well, I can only get double shields. Okay, so you pop out the other shield and you use it. It's the same bearing. It's looking beyond what they tell you to find the right answer. There's always a solution. It's just being able to look beyond what they tell you to find the solution, I think, is what's important. And whether that was upbringing or not, I'm not sure. Back when I was growing up, things were different. Nowadays it's a replacement world. Throw it away, buy a new one. Yeah. But a lot of facilities can't afford that. And I'll give you an example. Like my wife says, but go buy a new car. Now watch, it'll probably break. I'll knock on wood. It's got 273,000 miles on it. But I'm faithful in replacing the timing belt every 60,000 miles. And, I'm hoping I can get at least 500,000. Maybe I'll get a free car from the company. I don't know. But the point is, it's about preventive maintenance. And it's easier in today's industry to throw it away and buy a new one, because then they don't have to deal with it. And, we really don't train people to look beyond the common answer. It can't be fixed, buy a new one. Nobody wants to dig any deeper. It's easier to say replace it, because then they don't have to deal with it for 5 or 10 years. There's no maintenance involved.
So that type of messaging that you bring to an organization, how does that go over?
Sometimes good, sometimes not good. I mean, I'm known as a straightforward person, and that turns a lot of people off. But that's my MO. I mean, you can either get someone, and I'm not going to say things like I normally would say, but you're going to get somebody that's wishy-washy, and you're never going to get the true answer to the solution. They're always going to mask it, but it'll come back. Give someone enough rope and they'll hang themselves. In this field, I've known usually a facility manager doesn't last more than 3, maybe 5 years at the most. And then the CEO catches on to them. Or if they're not to be disrespectful, an easygoing CEO, they just leave the person in there for years and years and years because they never knew right from wrong. They buffaloed them. And that's not the best thing. So you either get somebody that's pretty aggressive or someone that's kind of easygoing. I wish I was in between, but I'm not. I mean, I would have probably had more opportunities, but I am what I am. And, at my age, you're never going to change. I just know what I can do and how I can bring solutions to people who ask for, who have problems. And I think that's what's important, finding solutions without costing them millions of dollars or thousands.
We would talk about that. So when I was doing the recruiting at Gosselin Martin, I mean, I had people who would respond to every job that we put out there and they wanted to be considered. You weren't one of those people. But on those opportunities we discussed, Brian and I would have that conversation. I'd be like, you from the technical standpoint, perfect, right? But then we'd have that soft skill conversation. And that's why I always give you credit, because you would tell me, we would talk about the messaging and maybe we tame it a little bit. And you're like, I can't. And so therefore, I appreciated that, because there were some opportunities that go like, I can't put you forward, but you're very self-aware, right? And that's why I think that there has to be room for people like you who are so technically proficient these days when, hospitals are failing and hospitals don't have money. There needs to be some sort of MacGyver out there who, maybe they're a little rough around the edges, but you're certainly not. You're a guy who can communicate. You're not kind of on an island soft skill wise, and that's kind of the shame of it, that folks with that strong technical background, I think we're losing them because they may not have the entire soft skill. Now, you do need some soft skills, right? You can't go on carpet bombing everything all the time, but I think we're losing that generation in healthcare facilities. Have you seen it in that?
Well, I have, and I guess that goes back to my how I was trained at one particular facility. I walked in and they had hired a management company, and they said if I want my job, I had to bid on it. I says, no, I don't think so. So I quit.
Wait, so you're at a hospital facility?
It was in a hospital, but they had contracted out maintenance to a management company.
Okay.
Well, I went to work for that management company 6 months later because I was somewhat stubborn and I wouldn't bid on the job. I said, I've been doing this for 20 some years and now you want me to bid on my job? No, that's not going to happen. Well, I go to work for that.
Was that a surprise when you walked in that morning? That's kind of what the news that greeted you?
I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when.
Okay.
So I was kind of prepared. So I go to work for that company, and that company taught me a couple of things. One, that, always ask why. Always know your business, what your horsepower, your boilers, what your square footage is, how many ton chillers you have, what you use for heating and cooling. But one of the things that they did teach me was, when you go into a building, because I did surveys for them, it was be very aggressive at the first approach. because they're going to try to downplay you and make you out to be the enemy because you know you're there to make them look bad. So I think that started my development of being somewhat tactless, because they were tactless when they came in. They were relentless. It was like, why are you doing it this way? Why aren't you doing this? Well, the book says it should be this, but we don't do that. Well, why not? It was constant. It was like an attorney and I was the witness. So, I kind of developed that style. And I think that's what preempted this type of culture with me.
That's interesting. You said that, when you started with that company, their premise, they know you are there to make them look bad. It's almost like from the very beginning, it's a contentious relationship. You can't really, I mean, if that's the mindset going in, it's very difficult to come together.
Well, it is, when you have a company that comes in and says, hey, I'm in charge of maintenance now. You're going to do everything this way. So instead of having one book for Joint Commission, they're telling you you're going to have 33 books. And you're like, why? One book worked for years. Well, we don't care. We want it this way. Why? Doesn't matter why. I want you to do it this way. You either going to do it or there's the door. That's the attitude you got. And, when you went in and you went to these training seminars or these management, whatever they would call them back then, talent improvement or self-help, they would tell you, this is what you need to do. They would pound it in your head. You need to be relentless with the current facility manager because we don't know if we're going to keep them. You are going to give us an opinion on his background and his expertise. Why is he doing it this way? What is he doing? Why isn't he doing this? Why isn't he checking the extinguishers or the exit signs or the egress lights like he's supposed to? And that's what kind of developed that.
Do you find that so you've been on the consulting side for 5 years now. Do you find that messaging is easier as a consultant than a hospital employee?
I do, because in a consulting, you do the report, you give it to them, you walk away. If they don't like you, so what? I gave you this stuff. If you don't want to follow it, it's on you. In a hospital role, it falls on the facility manager if you don't do it. Or, you get the CEO to give you your evaluations. Well, you're not doing this, this, and this, and this. So you got more criteria you have to follow. With a consultant, at least for me, when I do the electrical and the life safety and the stuff like that, I can put down no egress lights, no exit signs, no CO monitors. Electrical is fine. It's, to them, it's my opinion, but it's not. It's based on BOMA standards. It's based on the condition of the equipment. It's based on your visual, what you see. If there's no exit signs and no egress lights, that's a no-brainer. Whether they like it or not, doesn't matter. You can still put it down. You walk away and say, you don't have no egress lights. Oh, well.
As a consultant, did they look at you more as an expert than they did when you were like a facility director? Because they're paying for that service, do they look at you differently as a consultant than when you were full-time in the FM role?
Yes, I think so, because I get a lot of calls from facilities that I've visited and asking me for my expert opinion on what is their best choice. And I go back to a lot of places to help them out. I had a phone call last night from a friend of mine who was at a place, and he goes, boy, I bet you they wish they would have listened to you. I says, why is that? He goes, because they have no steam. They've got 100 leaks. They should have listened to you when you were there. I says, maybe so, but this is the fallout of it. Now they don't have no heat. They got steam leaks everywhere. It looks like the Manhattan when the steam tunnel blew up down there, that they said. So I says, hey, It is what it is. But, I put it in the report. I gave it to them. If they don't want to follow it, it's on them. It's not on me.
You talked about your ability to fix things. Brian's got a blueberry farm down in the western Pennsylvania. Brian is he'll call me and talk about the new equipment that he's got, that he's fixing snowplows, tractors, whatever it happens to be. So you're a very hands-on person. You can fix everything. Were you always that? And I know you started kind of with the gentleman you lived above, but when you were growing up, did you want to get into facility management? What were you thinking? How'd you end up in this?
When I first started out, I started in a wood mill, and I worked in maintenance, and I was in charge.
How old were you?
18.
Okay.
I became a millwright, Class A. I went through their traineeship, and I was promoted rather quickly. The plant manager saw the worth in me, and he promoted me, which I was fortunate. Unfortunately, the plant closed, but I had some off and on jobs, and I had some good jobs, but none that I wanted to do. In our town, it was basically powdered metal. I was employed in a plant as a die setter off the street. And I stayed 3 days because it was not my cup of tea. That's not what I wanted to do. I got a phone call from the hospital, and they said, "Would you like a job as an electrician?" And I said, yes, because I went to school for electrical, and I went and interviewed. And I can remember the words to this day. He goes, "Why would you want to work in a hospital?" I says, "Because it's maintenance, and I enjoy repairing things."
Good answer.
And I escalated, and from there my career started. And when I was when I left the job because of that management company, I went back to school and got my degree, which has helped me in my career significantly. Did I choose to want to go on and get a PE? No, because to me, when you got to put your name on something, it's yours. I don't want to sit behind a desk. I like to get my hands dirty. Right now, if you look at my fingernails, they're not down to the bone, but that's because otherwise they would be filthy. But that's the difference in a person. It's knowing what they can do and how they can fix things, coming up with quick solutions. Do I shoot from the hip? Sometimes. But am I right? Usually right. I'll tell you, I want to tell you this story. I had a manager, and it's funny because he came in to see me one day, and he goes, he said my name. He goes, "Cannella." He slams the door. He goes, "I can't stand you." I says, "Why is that?" He goes, "Because you're always right 99 times out of 100, and it drives me crazy." I says, "What do you want me to do about it? I can't help it." I says, it's how I was born. It's how I was imprinted. I don't know what to tell you, but we talk to this day, and he still says the same thing. He says, "I've learned so much from you, and I want to thank you." And, to me, it's passion. It's about the little things that are important, because if you have a clean outside, when I went to my last hospital, we drove in. I was offered 2 different positions, and we talked about it, one in Ohio and one at the other place. So I took the other place because I saw the outside, and I thought, boy, this place is really bad. It needs some help. So I took the job. So after a few years, I promoted an electrician to a manager. God love him. And we get along. We still talk. And he came in the office the one day, and he slammed the door, and he was like livid, swearing at me. It is what it is. After he got done, he left. He came back.
So he comes into your office, starts yelling at you.
Yes.
Okay.
And he called me a lot of acronyms, and I'm like, okay. So a couple weeks later, he got sick and he was in the hospital. And he came back to me and knocked on the door. He says, "Can I talk to you?" I says, "Absolutely. Come on in. What's up?" He goes, "You'd be surprised what you see when you're laying flat in your back on a stretcher going down the hall." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I know now why things are important to you." He says, "You will never have to worry about bugs in the lights, chipped paint, or fingerprints on the ceiling tile." Because every morning I'd go there and I'd make rounds and I would text them. I'd say, "Why do we have fingerprints on the ceiling tile?" Because if I see it, a visitor sees it. And a visitor sees so much more because their eyes are open. And he says, "You will never have to worry about that again." And I never did, because he would get there before me and make rounds and say, "Hey, what the hell's going on?" So it changed the way the department took pride in their work. They started developing pride. They used gloves when they got into the ceiling, so they wouldn't leave dirty fingerprints. They wouldn't write on the grid work MPS, like medium pressure steam, which there is none, or they would write zone valve. So they would use a sticker. We wanted it to be professional. So it changed the department overall. So, I mean, that's where my passion comes from, because what I see, the visitors saw, but they saw it 10 times more than me. It imprinted on them like, "Oh boy, what a place. Look at that dirty ceiling tile," you know?
Yep. Yep. And that's always what I've, appreciated about you. You tell it like it is, but on the flip side, you don't really get offended by people telling you either. It's kind of, you can handle both.
Well, you have to. I mean, in this position, you're always criticized because, people ask me, "Who's your boss?" I said, "Well, there's 500 nurses, there's the C-suite, everybody's my boss." I mean, that's the bottom line. You're there for the patients, you're there for the employees. So everybody's your boss. You're there to make their lives better, the environment safe, and comfortable. So that's what's important. And people have forgotten that. We don't teach that in school. That's why I think it's important. Yeah, okay, go to school, but there should be some sort of training program, like a journeyman, a couple of years. You are hooked to that person's belt, so you become like them. Maybe their personality won't be as strong, but you will have the same passion that they do, and I think that's what's important. And people don't have that. And I'll say passion all the time, whether it's passion or heart or the expertise. People don't have that. We don't teach that. You got to be born with it, or have a family that has raised you with that.
So are you suggesting, kind of like as a train, going back to your journeyman comment there? So like if you could create it, would you have kind of out in the field, not job shadow, but a form of job shadowing where, okay, they're 3 years in, now you pair them with somebody? What would that look like?
I think it would be important. So you get somebody that maybe got out of school and they have a passion, whether they were a carpenter or whether they were an auto mechanic, it doesn't matter. Anybody can be taught this trade, but they got to have the desire. And if they don't have the desire, so you interview them, you bring them in, kind of like what this old house did when they brought in those students and they trained them as carpenter apprentice. It would be the same thing, facility manager apprentice. So you taught them the important things. When you're walking down the hallway, you can hear that fan that kicks on. Oh, that's the fan for the boiler. Why is that on? That shouldn't be on. They are tuned to that stuff. And that's what you need to instill in someone. And we don't do that. So you get somebody that graduated from school. I'm a mechanical engineer. Okay, big whip. So they come in and they know book smart, but they don't know anything else. They couldn't rebuild a pump if their life depended on it. So in a survival situation, what would they do? They'd call probably a mechanical contractor to come in and say, "Hey, can you fix this?" You got to think outside the box, and that we don't teach, and that's what's sad in today's society. The code book is a very useful thing, but you got to take the time to find the answers in it, and it's very resourceful. You can find anything you want, but you got to take the time, and you got to want to be able to do it. And everybody wants a quick answer. They want a quick return on their dollar, and they're not going to get that. You got to work for it. When I started at the farm, I started planting blueberries, and fortunately, a gentleman in Michigan where I bought my plants gave me a good deal. And I don't know how many we planted. We didn't even have a tractor. So I found a part, which I thought was a part for my grader, but I got greedy and I bought the whole tractor and I put it back together and still use it. And, I couldn't afford a brand new tractor. So I bought the used one, put it back together, and we started small. But it was building on that. And that's what's important. You can build on your education, but it's how you get developed. And we don't have a training program. I don't know of any training program for facility managers, especially in healthcare.
Yeah.
You get somebody, I made medical devices. I made bottle caps for medicine bottles. Does that constitute you as an expert in the medical field or healthcare? No.
Yeah.
I'm a carpenter. Who cares if you're a carpenter? Do you know the life safety code? Do you know what a 2-hour firewall? People don't even know what a 2-hour firewall is, or what a fire door is, or the 10 checkpoints that you got to do on fire doors.
Do you see that in your consulting role now, and not naming any specific places, but do you see that over the last 5 years where you're going into these organizations in your role and there's just fundamentals of FM that are lacking?
Yes. I mean, I was at a place recently, the generator's there. When was the last time you ran it? I don't know. When was the last time you did a load test? What's that? When was the last time you checked your egress lights? Oh, are you required to? It's that stuff. They don't know. They talk, or they're a friend of the administrator who think, they put a set of spark plugs in somebody's car. That constitute them as a mechanic. They're right here, but they're not. They don't know the fundamentals, and that's the problem. That's why I think it's important. We need to start a journeyman or a training program, at least a year underneath someone's belt, to shadow them, to go through a Joint Commission inspection, to go through a Department of Health or another inspection, to learn what are the important role that you need to do to be where you're at, to become successful. Because once you get a bad name in the field, nobody's going to hire you. They're going to say, "Oh, what do you want that joker for?"
Right. Yeah. No, it's what are there, 6,100 hospitals in the United States, but it's a small group of people, and everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. And so you're absolutely right. Do you like educating in the traditional sense of whether it was your staff when you had a staff under you, do you prefer educating kind of like the formal, or are you more of an educator kind of like walking around the facility, walking around, pointing things out as you go? How do you like to educate?
I think I do all of the above. Like when I first get into a building, they ask me for suggestions. I will walk them around and say, "Look, you can't have cracks or problems in the ceiling. Your firewall's got to go all the way to the deck, or I will teach them my hands-on. Like, where I'm at now, taught them how to rebuild a pump. They didn't know that. They thought that was better than sliced bread, because nobody has ever taken the role to teach people, and they think that's worth a lot, and that shows respect. You know, you got to respect the position, not necessarily the person, but you got to respect their knowledge. When I showed the guys where I'm at now how to rebuild a pump, they said, "It's that easy?" I said, "Yeah." Okay, and I can kid with them, and they can kid with me, and there's nothing taken to heart. I mean, it is what it is, but it's the ability to get your hands dirty, to be able to roll up your sleeves, to get down in the nitty gritty and help them. Many places I do that. I think that shows the difference between somebody in a suit and tie or somebody that's willing to get dirty.
Yeah, yeah. Do you enjoy, so this is Brian Cannella. Brian is the Senior Facility Condition Assessment Manager with Aramark. Do you enjoy the consulting role over kind of the director role? Does consulting in some ways allow you to do more of what you like?
It does, but I do miss working in a hospital. I mean, a lot of people will call me on the phone that I've known. They say, "Hey, Mr. Code Expert, what do we got? Can we do this, this, and this?" I enjoy the hospital because it's fast paced. Currently, you know, I'll leave on a Monday morning at 3, 4 in the morning, fly somewhere, and then work the rest of the day. And it's fast paced. It's not the same as getting my hands dirty all the time. I like fixing problems, and it's hard to fix when you're in a consulting role, because you're going out and saying, "Oh, your fire alarm panel needs to be replaced." So you figure out how much it's going to cost. You know, what is the best choice for me? You do the report. That's it. It's done. It's over. Where, you know, when I'm called on to go to a hospital like I'm currently at now, they're using me to find why we have a steam problem, or why our air pressure relationships aren't right. So I give them solutions to help augment that.
You go to both colleges and to hospitals now in the role.
Yes.
Is there a difference between the two? What do you say that, well, obviously there's a difference, right? One's education, one's healthcare. But what do you perceive the differences between the two to be?
Well, the regulatory is not as stringent in a hospital or in a college as it is in a hospital. There's more regulations. There's more inspections in a hospital. More bookkeeping. Where in colleges and universities, they kind of like, it'll be okay. You know, they get away with more things because it's just the nature of the beast. You know, they might have a fire marshal that comes in, but, you know, lack of a better term, he knows the place is in dire straits and he kind of leaves them go. So the regulatory is not as stringent. You know, that being said, no egress lights coming down the stairs. Well, what do you do when you lose power? And that's like, well, what do you do if you lose power? Oh, the teachers use their phones as a flashlight to get the student down the steps. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. What do you do in a hospital? We just set the gurneys at the bottom of the steps and wheel them into the ER when they break all their legs. You know, so there's a difference there. It's more intense in healthcare, and I think that's where the difference is. We're not as regulated in universities and colleges as we are in hospitals. Like a lot of the dorms, they have battery operated smoke detectors. So what do you think the students do with the batteries?
Yeah. Yep.
They steal them.
Yeah. Students are students.
Yeah. I mean, so what do you have then? Nothing. No fire alarm, no CO. You know, a lot of places, you know, you're required to have a CO detector above, beyond, and adjacent to the areas fossil fuels are being utilized. Do they have them? No. Do they think it's a big deal? No. I was just in a place, nothing but gas fired everywhere. Do they have CO monitors? Not one. You know, is that right? I guess maybe when it was built, yeah, but the code states that you got to have them. Did they implement the new code? No, because they probably didn't know. So there we go back to, who do we have in that position? They're not in the best interest of the facility.
Does that frustrate you?
It does. It frustrates me a lot because, as I said, I'm about life safety and
Right.
What is right, and it just drives me. It drives me so crazy. I don't sleep at night because these things are running through my head. It's like a computer, and it keeps me awake, and it literally does. I know we have talked many a times. I can't sleep. It just goes through my head all the time. Why can we allow this? Because we're putting people at arm's way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can laugh about you not being able to sleep and everything else, but you just kind of hit it on the head, right? That's a dorm. We know that there are dorm fires where people die, right? And that's kind of what that's what you're trying to guard against or prevent.
I just, my niece's son is going to a college, and I says, did you go look at their life safety? Do they have fire alarm? No, we didn't really think about it. I said, well, that should be one of the things on your checklist if you're a parent and you're going to a college.
You asked your nephew if he went to look at the life safety plan?
I asked him, I said, do you have life safety in your dorm? He goes, what do you mean? I said, you got fire alarms? No. I says, and you're going to go there? I said,
come on, though. The kid's he's a college student who's looking at life safety.
I think everybody should, and I think the parents should, because your student
is going.
Your son or your daughter are going there, and there's no smoke detectors.
Right? No. You have a good point. I'm just trying to stand up for the college kid who is probably looking at the girls and not looking at the life safety.
Well, I get that. It's very frustrating for me when you go into these dorms and you find the stairway doors propped open with a door wedge, or there's no egress lights, or the exit signs aren't working. You wonder, and I look at the worst case. What if a fire breaks out?
Right. That's why you're wired.
Yeah, I mean, but. I told my niece this. I said, did you look at the fire alarms? And no, we didn't even think about it. I said, you're paying how much a month? And you don't know? Well, I think they might have one. But I happened to go there and do a survey later. They're all battery, not interconnected. And half the batteries are missing out of them.
So two of my children are in college right now. The next time I talk to them, I'm going to ask them that question, and I guarantee you I know the answer. But anyway.
They're going to say, yes, we have a smoke detector, Dad.
So let me ask you two questions as we wrap up, and I thank my guest Brian Cannella for appearing. First thing, Brian, in 1 minute, I mentioned your blueberry farm. You mentioned your blueberry farm. Where is it, and what do you do with it?
It's in St. Mary's. Well, it's in Rascelis. Don't ask me to spell that because I'll debacle it. We sell blueberries in the summer as a pick your own, but we have planted blackberries and raspberries, but the deer find the raspberry plants more desirable than the people do. I've got some honeyberries and cranberries and kiwis planted, but it's the old Roper farm, and General Grant fished on the stream below my property. So there's a lot of history to this property.
You have never told me that. I love Grant. I love the Civil War. I did not know that.
Well, if you read my, let me see, I've got a website for the blueberry. If you type in PYO berries, you'll see the website, but there's a lot of history to this area where General Grant visited the Roper farm, and it was a potato farm. And my dad was in the hospital with a gentleman who had the land, and I wanted to buy the entire thing, but the gentleman says that's too much for one person to own. but I come to find out that he inherited a lot of it through his wife's family, who was related to General Kane, I believe.
Wow. Okay. Last question. I'm going to read up on that. And shoot, General Grant. Last question. And I know that in your consulting role, you will occasionally sit in on interviews. They're trying to hire a facility director. You were a facility director. You know the role. You know what's important. When you sit in on these interviews, what is the quality of the candidate? What are you finding?
I am finding very varied individuals who lack a lot of knowledge. You know, you ask them what are the 7 environmental care standards are, and they can't even answer that. You ask them what a fire door is, and they can't answer it. So, you know, people can tell you anything in a resume, but when you get them before an audience or question them, they have no idea. It's very disheartening that you interview for a job. You should at least read a book or something and know what you're talking about, and they don't.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason I wanted to do this particular episode with you too. We can't devalue knowledge, experience, and history for what some folks have, especially in these days, because there's just too much at risk. Right.
And you know, unfortunately, I think the facility manager's position is undervalued. I've had a lot of offers, but they're for pennies on the dollar. You know, you're going to pay for knowledge. If you don't pay somebody for what they're worth, they're going to end up leaving. Yeah. You don't value them. A good facility manager can make you go from here to great. And I always want world-class service. And if you can't find that in a person, you're never going to achieve it.
Well, Brian Cannella, I have to put my glasses on, Brian, to read this job title. Senior Facility Condition Assessment Manager. They ever call you an SFCAM?
No, but I've been called something else, but I can tell you what it is, but you'd have to figure out the acronym.
Well, as I was reading that acronym, I was thinking to myself, I'm sure I'm teeing him up to bring another acronym into this conversation.
Yes, I've been told I'm the TTMFICC, but you might want to just you might want to cut that.
All right, Brian Cannella, thank you for appearing on the Healthcare Facilities Network.
Peter, it's been a pleasure. I admire you. I've always thought you were a very good colleague and a person to work with. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for the time.
My pleasure. Listen, I knew you'd be a star. I've been telling Brian for a couple of years now, I got to get you on. But he travels a lot and he's in airports, so we were finally able to make it work. You have a great story to tell. So
thank you.
This is Peter Martin, Vice President of Business Development for CREF. As always, thank you for tuning into the Healthcare Facilities Network, and we'll see you in the future.